My name is Clara Hayes, and I'm 34 years old. If you'd told the 4-year-old version of me that I'd one day walk with a cane and a limp, I would have laughed. I was the girl who ran marathons, danced until sunrise, and carried confidence like armor. But that was before the night my life split in two, before the accident that left me staring at hospital ceilings, wondering if I'd ever walk again. Tonight, I wasn't just walking. I was walking back into a room full of ghosts wearing expensive perfume. The 10-year high school reunion, a night designed for people to show off who they'd become. The hall smelled faintly of champagne and nostalgia. The same banners that once hung in our gym were now strung along the walls, faded but proud. Class of 2011 forever golden. A soft jazz band played near the bar, where familiar faces had already clustered into little circles, laughing, comparing lives, comparing successes. At first, I tried to blend in my black dress, simple but elegant. My hair swept back the way it used to be. But as soon as I crossed the room, I could feel it. The stares, the double takes. Someone whispered, "Is that Clara? What happened to her?" Then came the laughter, low at first, then sharper, the kind that wasn't born from humor but from superiority. I gripped my cane tighter, the smooth wood grounding me as heat crept up my neck. My instinct was to leave, to turn around and disappear before the pain could find me again. But I didn't spend years rebuilding myself just to run from whispers. So, I lifted my chin, smiled, and kept walking. A woman I barely recognized, once a shy girl, now glowing with confidence, came up and hugged me. "Clara, you look amazing," she said sincerely. For a moment, her kindness steadied me. But behind her, I caught sight of them. 3 women standing near the punch table, their eyes locked on me, smirking as if the years hadn't passed. Brittany, Tessa, Lauren, my old friends, back in high school. We were inseparable, the self-proclaimed Golden Girls. Brittany was the leader, always holding court like a queen bee. Tessa was the wild one, bold and loud, the life of every party. And Lauren, she was the quiet manipulator, smiling sweetly while feeding gossip behind your back. I used to think they loved me. I used to think we were a team. Until senior year, when competition over college admissions and boys turned them against me. By graduation, they'd spread lies so cruel I couldn't walk down the hallway without hearing my name laced with mockery. And now, a decade later, their eyes told me nothing had changed. They hadn't matured, they'd just traded high school lockers for handbags that cost more than rent. I could almost hear their thoughts. Clara the cripple, the fall of the Golden Girl. But they didn't know who I was anymore. They didn't know that I'd built myself from scratch, piece by piece, through pain and grit and nights of doubt. I walked past them, my cane clicking on the marble floor like punctuation marks in a sentence only I understood. Every step was a reminder of survival. People came and went, greeting me warmly, some out of politeness, others out of genuine surprise. But the whispers never really stopped. I found a quiet corner and took a deep breath. My reflection in the mirror across the room looked strong, composed, even beautiful, in a way that only hardship could carve. Still, I felt the old ache of humiliation tugging at the edges of my heart. Then, a voice called out behind me. "Well, if it isn't Clara Hayes. I barely recognized you." I turned. Brittany! Her blonde curls were flawless, her red lips curved in a smile that didn't touch her eyes. Tessa and Lauren flanked her like perfectly dressed shadows. "Wow," Tessa said, tilting her head. "You look different." Lauren's eyes flicked to my cane. "What happened?" she asked, the false concern dripping from every syllable. I smiled, tightly. "Life happened." They laughed softly, exchanging glances like they were still in some exclusive club that I'd been kicked out of. For a second, I thought of walking away. But something inside me, something sharper and stronger than pride, held me still. "You all look exactly the same," I said calmly. "Still together, I see." Brittany smirked. "Of course, some things don't change." I nodded. "You're right. Some things don't." They didn't notice the way my words carried weight. They didn't notice that I wasn't the same broken girl they used to mock. I had learned that real strength doesn't come from being admired, it comes from surviving when no one's watching. The night went on, laughter echoing, music playing, and old friendships rekindling around me. I stayed longer than I expected, not because I enjoyed it, but because I wanted to face every memory that once haunted me. And as I stood there, Watching Brittany clink glasses with Tessa and Lauren, I realized something profound. They hadn't changed, because they'd never had to. Life had been easy for them. For me, it had been a battlefield, but I'd walked out alive. That's when I saw them, my old tormentors, now successful, rich, and smirking right at me. They looked exactly the same, smug smiles and cruel eyes hidden behind expensive clothes. Brittany stood in front of me, her confidence practically radiating like it used to in high school. Her designer dress was perfectly tailored, her golden hair styled in soft curls that looked effortless but clearly weren't. She had that same air of superiority, the kind that made everyone else feel smaller just by existing near her. Beside her was Tessa, always the loud one, still talking like the world revolved around her voice. Her laugh carried across the room, a shrill reminder of late nights in high school when her humor often came at someone else's expense, usually mine. She'd reinvented herself as some kind of social media influencer, documenting her perfect life through filters and captions about confidence. It was ironic, really, because Tessa's confidence had always been borrowed from someone else's pain. Then there was Lauren, quiet as ever, but no less dangerous. She'd always been the snake in the grass, sweet smile, soft tone, but her words could destroy reputations faster than fire could consume paper. She didn't need to say much. Her eyes did the talking, cold and calculating. I'd heard she was deep into real estate now, running a company that flipped luxury properties for millions. She looked like money, but she still carried that same invisible smirk that said she thought she was better than everyone else. Seeing them together again, I felt like I'd been pulled back into a cruel teenage dream that refused to end. 10 years later, and the golden trio hadn't grown up, they'd just upgraded their wardrobes. "Clara, it's really been forever," Brittany said, tilting her head. "You look, well." Her tone made it sound like an insult wrapped in silk. Tessa grinned. "I saw you limping earlier. Did something happen?" Her faux concern hit like a slap. I kept my smile polite. "Just an accident a few years back." Lauren raised an eyebrow. "Oh, that's terrible. But you seem fine." Fine. That word again. People love using it when they don't want to look too long at your scars. "I am," I said firmly. "More than fine, actually." Brittany chuckled softly. "Good for you. It must have been tough, though. Not many people bounce back from that kind of thing." Her eyes flicked down at my cane. There it was again, that cruel curiosity masked as sympathy. Inside, part of me wanted to snap back, to remind her that real strength isn't about walking perfectly. It's about standing tall even when it hurts. But I stayed calm. I'd learned long ago that silence could be more powerful than rage. I watched them as they laughed among themselves, still the center of attention, surrounded by people desperate to impress them. The same dynamic as always. They fed off admiration the way a flame feeds off oxygen. But what they didn't realize was that while they'd spent their years chasing validation, I'd spent mine building something real, something none of them knew existed. At one point, Brittany turned to me again. "So, what do you do now, Clara?" she asked, her tone playful but edged with curiosity. "Are you still teaching?" I hadn't been a teacher in years, but they didn't know that. I'd quit that life after the accident, when everything fell apart. What came after? Well, it was something I'd kept quiet, deliberately so. "I run my own business," I said simply. "Oh?" Lauren asked, her tone skeptical. "What kind of business?" "A consulting firm," I replied, taking a sip of my drink. "We help brands scale online." Tessa laughed. "Oh, so like a freelance thing?" I smiled. "Not exactly." They exchanged looks, each silently deciding I was exaggerating. It didn't matter. Let them underestimate me, that was my favorite kind of power. Across the room, someone clinked a glass and called for a toast. Brittany raised hers high. "To success?" she said dramatically, the crowd echoing her. "And to never losing who we are." I almost laughed. Never losing who we are. How ironic. They'd spent their lives clinging to an image they built as teenagers, an image that no longer fit them, yet they wore it like a second skin. As the evening stretched on, I found myself watching them from a distance, curious. They talked about investors, deals, upcoming projects. They bragged about board meetings and luxury vacations. Everything was about image. Everything was about money. But underneath their glossed-over stories, I saw the cracks. The insecurity, the desperation to still matter. I heard Lauren whisper something about a merger that's falling apart, and Brittany's fake smile faltered for half a second before she caught herself. It was a small detail, but I didn't miss it. For a moment, I almost felt pity for them. Almost. Because in that instant, I realized something. Despite their success, despite the money and status, they hadn't changed. They were still those same insecure girls trying to prove they were better than everyone else. The only difference was now they wore designer guilt instead of cheap perfume. And as I stood there, quietly watching them toast to themselves, I knew something they didn't. The world they bragged about, the business they were desperately trying to save, it was connected to me. But none of them knew that I was now in control of something far more powerful than they imagined. While they flaunted their wealth, I had built an empire they couldn't recognize. After the accident, when the doctors told me I might never walk properly again, my world shrank to the four corners of a hospital room. The silence was unbearable, machines humming, nurses' footsteps echoing, my own thoughts gnawing at me. I'd lost my teaching job because I couldn't stand for long hours anymore. Friends stopped calling when I didn't bounce back quickly enough. Even family looked at me with that quiet kind of pity that's worse than words. So I started building. Not physically, my body wasn't ready for that yet, but mentally. Lying in bed with my laptop propped on my knees, I started teaching myself everything I could. Coding, digital marketing, branding. The internet became my new classroom. Each click, each failed attempt, each late night was a step towards something bigger, even if I didn't know what it was yet. At first, I just wanted to feel useful again. I took small freelance projects, writing web copy, building simple sites for small businesses that couldn't afford big agencies. The money was small, but it felt like oxygen. Every new client meant I was reclaiming a part of my life. Months turned into years. My limp remained, but my mind was sharper than ever. I learned to hide behind my screen name, C. Hayes Consulting. Clients never saw me, they only saw results. The day I signed my first big contract, I remember staring at the screen, tears blurring the letters. It was a corporate deal worth more than I'd ever made in teaching. I'd done it from my apartment, in pajamas, with a cane leaning against my desk. That was when I realized this wasn't just survival anymore. It was power. With every success, I expanded, hired a small remote team, then another. I renamed my firm Nova Edge Solutions, a nod to rebirth. I didn't want to be the old Clara anymore. Nova Edge became my shield, my identity. I stayed behind the curtain while my team represented the face of the brand. No one questioned it. No one asked for the CEO's name. I liked it that way. There was something satisfying about anonymity. It made the world treat me for what I could do, not what I looked like. Within 3 years, Nova Edge was quietly consulting for some of the biggest names in retail and tech. We were the unseen architects behind marketing campaigns people thought came from billion-dollar agencies. The irony? Some of my clients were people from my own high school. They just didn't know the woman behind the curtain was the same girl they used to whisper about. When I first saw Brittany's company name on our client list, I almost laughed. She'd launched a sustainable fashion brand that relied heavily on influencer marketing. Tessa's influence, to be exact. They were trying to make it seem like a revolution, but behind the scenes, it was chaos. Their proposals were sloppy, their data outdated, their branding shallow. My team had to clean up their mistakes more than once, and they never even knew it. Every time Nova Edge helped them stay afloat, I wondered what would happen if they found out the woman they once mocked was now saving their careers. I didn't do it for revenge. Not yet. I did it because it proved to me that I had become more than the girl who was laughed at in a school hallway. I was capable of building something that mattered, something that didn't need anyone's validation. The morning after the reunion, I sat in my office, clean, minimalist, full of glass and light. My cane rested beside my desk, polished like a badge of honor. My assistant, Janelle, came in holding a file. "There's a situation with Lumina Threads," she said. I looked up. Lumina Threads, the company Brittany, Tessa, and Lauren had started together. "What kind of situation?" "They're asking for a meeting," Janelle said. "They want to negotiate a new partnership. They're claiming they've worked with us before and that the CEO owes them a favor." I almost smiled. "A favor?" "Yes, they're saying you promised to review their new proposal personally." I laughed under my breath. "Of course they were. Set up a review," I said. "Let's see what they've got." Janelle nodded. then paused. You know them, don't you? I hesitated. Yes, a long time ago. That evening, I sat alone in my office, the city lights blinking through the glass. My reflection stared back at me stronger, calmer, untouchable. For the first time in a long while, I felt the faint pulse of something I hadn't let myself feel in years. Control. I thought about their faces at the reunion, how they laughed, how they looked at me like I was less. They'd built their careers on vanity and manipulation, while I had built mine in silence, fueled by pain they'd never understand. And now, unknowingly, they were coming to me for help. I leaned back in my chair, letting the irony wash over me. And then, I overheard something that made my blood run cold. They were talking about a deal that could make or break their new company, one tied to my firm. 2 days after the reunion, I found myself back in the same coffee shop I used to visit before the accident. It had become my thinking place. The owner still remembered me and brought my drink to the corner table without asking, black coffee with a little honey. I was halfway through my first sip when I heard a familiar voice behind me. Brittany, I'm telling you, we can't lose this deal. I froze. I knew that voice anywhere. Tessa. I turned my head just enough to see them. The golden trio, sitting 3 tables away, papers scattered across the table like their confidence had shattered with them. I could have moved, pretended not to hear, but curiosity anchored me to my seat. Lauren leaned forward, her brow furrowed. We need Nova Edge. Without them, the investors are pulling out. This merger with HaloWare can't happen unless we have a digital strategy team. I nearly choked on my coffee. They were talking about my company. Brittany's voice dropped, but the panic in it was clear. I've tried calling. I've emailed 3 times. No response. Who even runs that company anyway? Some arrogant exec too busy to take a meeting? Probably some guy, Tessa muttered. They always think they're untouchable. I had to bite my lip to keep from laughing. Lauren sighed, rubbing her temples. We can't afford to wait. If Nova Edge doesn't approve the contract by Friday, we're done. This is our biggest launch. Done. That word rolled around in my head like music. I took another sip of coffee, steadying my heartbeat. It wasn't satisfaction. I felt it was something colder, quieter. The universe had placed a strange kind of justice in front of me, and all I had to do was reach for it. They spent the next hour brainstorming, their confidence unraveling with every sentence. Brittany kept trying to sound composed, but desperation leaked through her voice like cracks in glass. Tessa pulled out her phone and started scrolling. What if I tag them online? Maybe that'll get their attention. Lauren snatched the phone away. Don't you dare. That'll make us look desperate. Oh, because we're not? Tessa snapped. Enough, Brittany hissed, her voice breaking. We'll figure this out. We always do. I leaned back in my chair, watching them unravel. Once upon a time, their laughter could make me shrink into myself. Now it just sounded hollow. I remembered every cruel joke, every whispered comment about my cane, every fake apology they'd ever thrown my way, and now, there they were, floundering. It was poetic, but I wasn't the kind of person who believed in coincidences anymore. I believed in choices. And in that moment, I made one. I was going to help them, but on my terms. Not out of kindness. Not out of revenge. Out of purpose. Because they needed to see the woman I'd become. The one they thought would never stand tall again. I opened my laptop right there in the coffee shop and pulled up the Nova Edge dashboard. Their company name glared at me from the pending contracts list. Lumina Threads, partnership review, denied. I hadn't even realized we'd already turned them down once. My team had rejected their proposal because it was rushed, underdeveloped, and full of inflated numbers. I could have left it that way. But no, this was an opportunity fate rarely handed twice. I clicked review again. My assistant, Janelle, pinged me instantly. Hey, just saw you reopened the Lumina account. Should I prepare a new report? Not yet, I typed back. Let's see how far they're willing to go. As I watched the trio scramble across the cafe, a small smile tugged at my lips. Brittany was already on her phone again, her tone sugar-sweet and panicked. She was probably calling her bored, spinning a new version of reality, her specialty. But this time, I wasn't a supporting character in her story. They left soon after, still bickering, still oblivious that the very person they were begging for mercy sat just a few feet away. I waited until they were gone before standing up. My leg ached slightly as I shifted my weight to the cane, but the pain didn't bother me anymore. It reminded me that I'd survived worse than them. On the walk back to my office, the city lights glinted off the glass towers like sparks of old dreams. I thought about how strange life was, how the people who once broke you could someday need you to save them. When I reached my building, I went straight to my desk and opened the Lumina project file again. Their proposal was bad, really bad. No clear direction, no market research, just pretty words and recycled designs. But they didn't need to know that yet. I sent a simple, polite response from the Nova Edge account. Your proposal has been reviewed. Please note that due to capacity, we are not currently accepting new partnerships. Should availability change, we will reach out to you directly. A rejection, but with just enough hope to keep them waiting. And then I waited too, because I knew them. I knew pride would make them restless, and desperation would make them reckless. It wouldn't take long before they tried to find another way in. And when they did, I'd be ready. I decided to play along and make them face every ounce of humiliation they'd once given me. If they wanted to see the old Clara, I'd let them, but only long enough to set the trap. The morning after I sent the rejection email, my phone buzzed nonstop. Messages from my assistant, new client updates, and one particular notification that made me pause. New LinkedIn connection request, Brittany Cole. For a second, I just stared at the screen. Of course she'd found me. But she wouldn't find Nova Edge's Clara Hayes, she'd only find the professional version I allowed the world to see. My profile listed me as a marketing consultant working independently. Not a CEO, not an owner, just another cog in the corporate machine. I accepted the request. And waited. Within minutes, a message arrived. Clara, it was so nice seeing you at the reunion. I can't stop thinking about how inspiring you are. Let's catch up soon, I have a business idea that might interest you. There it was, the sugar-coated manipulation I remembered so well. 10 years hadn't changed her. I took a breath, letting the calm wash over me before replying. That's so kind, Brittany. I'd love to catch up. If she wanted to underestimate me, I'd gladly hand her the shovel to dig that hole deeper. 2 days later, we met at a high-end restaurant downtown. Brittany arrived first, all smiles and perfume, her confidence carefully painted on. Tessa and Lauren followed shortly after, just as polished, just as fake. Clara, you look amazing, Brittany said, leaning in to air-kiss my cheek. I hope we didn't overwhelm you at the reunion. We were just so surprised to see you. Not at all, I said smoothly. It was nice seeing familiar faces. Tessa giggled. You've always been so graceful. I don't think I could have handled what you went through, Lauren added. Seriously, it's incredible how strong you are. Their words were meant as compliments, but I could feel the condescension under each one. I smiled and played along. That was my role now, the fragile version of Clara they remembered. We ordered lunch, and soon enough, the real reason for the invitation surfaced. So, Brittany began, her tone casual but rehearsed. We're actually working on a really exciting project, a sustainable fashion brand. You might have heard of it, Lumina Threads? I nodded, pretending to think. That sounds familiar. Tessa leaned forward eagerly. We've been trying to expand. Our investors want a stronger digital presence, but the agency we used dropped us. We're kind of stuck, Lauren sighed. We heard your firm, your old employer has connections. Nova Edge, right? I nearly smiled. I've heard of them. Yes. Brittany's eyes lit up. You know someone there, don't you? I might, I said, keeping my tone vague. Why? Well, Brittany continued, voice softening, we were hoping you could help us get in touch with whoever's in charge, maybe put in a good word? I'm sure they'd listen to you. The irony of it almost made me laugh out loud. They wanted me to get them in touch with me, but I just nodded thoughtfully, like I was considering a big favor. I can see what I can do, I said. Oh, that would mean so much, Tessa said, reaching over to squeeze my hand. You've always been such a sweetheart. I let her. Let them all think I was the same meek girl they could manipulate. Inside, though, every word they said only sharpened my resolve. They talked for another hour, mostly about themselves, of course. About their vision, their mission, their brand values. Words that meant nothing when coming from women who once mocked people for wearing thrift store clothes. By dessert, Brittany leaned in closer. You know, Clara, if you help us out with this, we could really use someone like you on the team. I mean, social outreach, branding, you'd be perfect. We could even bring you on board, Tessa chimed in. Yeah, imagine us working together again. Like old times. Like old times. Those words hit differently. Like old times, when I carried their books, took the blame for their gossip, and laughed off their cruelty because I didn't know how to stand up for myself. I smiled sweetly. That would be nice. They left the lunch confident they'd secured me, and I left knowing exactly how to destroy their illusion. When I got home that night, I sat on my bed and thought about how easily they'd fallen into the act. They hadn't changed at all. They still believed they could control everyone around them with charm and pity. But this time, the girl they'd underestimated wasn't powerless. I pulled up my laptop and opened Nova Edge's internal portal. Action. Schedule preliminary consultation. Lumina Threads. I assigned it under my alias account. They'd think they were meeting with a project director. They'd think I was just a liaison. I smiled as I hit confirm. The trap was set. All I had to do was wait. And when they walked into that meeting room, they'd finally see who they were really dealing with. By the end of the night, I'd make sure they came to me for help without realizing who I was. The next morning, their panic began, and I watched it unfold with quiet satisfaction. By 9 a.m., the emails started pouring in. My assistant, Janelle, forwarded the first one with a simple note. You might want to see this. It was from Brittany Cole, subject line in all caps. Urgent. Requesting immediate meeting with Nova Edge CEO. The message itself was full of flattery and desperation. Brittany wrote about the inspiring conversation she'd had with an old friend named Clara Hayes, and how she was hoping to build a bridge between Lumina Threads and Nova Edge. She signed it off with a flourish of corporate politeness that barely concealed her fear. I stared at the screen for a long moment, my lips curving into a small, knowing smile. Forward it to my secondary inbox, I told Janelle. And reply professionally. Let her sweat a little. Over the next 2 hours, more messages came in. One from Tessa, trying to name-drop influencers as leverage. Another from Lauren, attaching a spreadsheet full of inflated projections. They were scrambling, throwing everything they had into the void, hoping something would stick. I replied through Janelle's account. Dear Miss Cole, thank you for your interest in working with Nova Edge Solutions. Unfortunately, our executive calendar is fully booked at this time. Should our availability change, we will reach out to you directly. Best regards, Nova Edge Operations Team Polite, distant, unmoved. The silence that followed must have terrified them, because by afternoon, Tessa was posting cryptic things on social media. Ever notice how some companies forget who helped them rise? She tweeted. Number disappointed, number corporate greed. I laughed softly when I saw it. Tessa always used the internet like a weapon, never realizing that when you swing a sword blindly, you often cut yourself first. The next day, I was in a meeting when Janelle stepped in, holding her tablet. They called again, she said. This time, Brittany wants to know the name of the CEO personally. Did she offer anything? I asked. Janelle smirked. A lunch invitation. And she mentioned a mutual friend you. I couldn't help it. I laughed. The sound echoed through my glass-walled office. Tell her the CEO doesn't do lunches, I said. And that the only way to be considered for review is through formal channels. Janelle hesitated. Should we tell them you're the CEO? I shook my head. Not yet. Let's see how far they're willing to chase a ghost. By midweek, they'd sent 3 follow-ups, each one more frantic than the last. One of them even tried to get in touch with one of my junior partners through LinkedIn. Every move they made only confirmed what I already knew: they were desperate. And desperate people make mistakes. That night, as I sat in my apartment overlooking the city, I thought about how poetic it all was. 10 years ago, I'd been the one waiting for their approval, waiting for their kindness, waiting for them to see me as more than a joke. Now, they were the ones waiting for my signature. It wasn't revenge, not really. It was balance. The world had finally tilted back in my favor, but I wasn't done yet. The next morning, I drafted an internal memo for my team. 2. Nova Edge Leadership Team Subject. Special Client Evaluation. Lumina Threads. We've received multiple requests for partnership consideration from Lumina Threads. Due to their prior connection with the CEO, they will be evaluated in a controlled meeting environment. Please schedule an in-person consultation this Friday, 2 p.m. Attending Executive C. Hayes. When I hit send, I felt something like adrenaline, a mix of justice and anticipation. Friday came faster than I expected. I arrived early, dressed in a charcoal suit that fit like confidence itself. My cane tapped softly against the tile as I walked through the quiet office halls. The conference room was ready. Polished table, chilled water, presentation screen glowing with the Nova Edge logo. My team had set up everything flawlessly. At exactly 2:07, the glass doors opened. Brittany entered first, her smile just a bit too wide. Tessa followed, eyes darting around nervously. Lauren came last, carrying a briefcase and a look of strained composure. "Ladies," Janelle greeted them, professional and cool. "Please have a seat. The CEO will be with you shortly." They thanked her, trying to hide their nerves. I watched them through the frosted glass wall from my private office, unseen but close enough to hear their chatter. "Do you think he's one of those older guys who never answers emails?" Tessa whispered. "Probably," Brittany said. "Most of them are all ego. We'll charm him. We always do." Charm, the word that had once been their weapon. I waited a moment longer, savoring the tension. Then, I picked up my cane, squared my shoulders, and walked toward the conference room. As the door opened, all three heads turned. Their conversation froze. For a split second, none of them moved. Brittany's smile faltered. Tessa's mouth dropped open. Lauren blinked like she couldn't believe what she was seeing. I stepped fully into the room, my cane tapping once against the floor. "Good afternoon," I said, voice steady. "I hear you've been trying to reach me." Brittany's lips parted. "You're—" "Yes," I smiled. "I'm the CEO." Silence filled the room, heavy and electric. And in that silence, 10 years of unspoken history hung between us, every cruel laugh, every whispered insult, every time they'd made me feel small. But now, I was the one standing at the head of the table. And they accepted the meeting, clueless about who they'd be facing. They strutted into the conference room like queens, ready to charm a phantom. From where I stood outside the frosted glass wall, I could see their silhouettes, three perfectly poised figures rehearsing their smiles and adjusting their jackets like this was just another boardroom victory waiting to happen. They had no idea the storm waiting behind that door had my name on it. I gave them 5 full minutes to simmer in uncertainty before stepping in. It wasn't about power, it was about poise. After years of letting them define the room, I was going to own it gracefully. When I finally opened the door, the soft click of my cane against the marble floor sliced through the silence like punctuation in a tense sentence. Brittany's confident smirk faded the second her eyes met mine. Tessa's hand froze halfway through a hair flip. Lauren's face went pale. For a long second, no one spoke. Then Brittany blinked and tried to recover. "See, Clara? What are you doing here?" I set my tablet on the table and smiled. "Good afternoon. I'm here because you requested a meeting with the CEO of Nova Edge Solutions." Tessa let out a nervous laugh. "Wait, what? You're saying you're the CEO?" "I am." I took a seat at the head of the table, calm and composed. "I see you've already met my assistant, Janelle. She mentioned your company's proposal." Lauren's eyes darted to the documents in front of her as if they might rearrange themselves into something more impressive. We didn't realize that I built the company you're trying to partner with." I finished for her, still smiling. "I know. Most people don't." The tension was thick enough to feel in the air. Brittany sat straighter, forcing a polite expression. "Clara, we're honestly thrilled to see how well you've done. This is incredible. Truly." Her voice trembled at the edges. She was trying to sound genuine, but the cracks were showing. "I appreciate that," I said, opening their proposal. "You've been quite persistent in trying to get our attention. Shall we discuss the terms?" "Of course," Lauren said quickly, seizing the chance to steer the conversation. "Lumina Threads is expanding globally, and we'd love to work with Nova Edge on a full rebranding and digital rollout. Our line focuses on sustainability and inclusivity values I know your company shares." Her words were rehearsed, practiced, but I'd read between lines like those for years. What she really meant was, "We're desperate, and we'll say whatever it takes." I leaned back, keeping my expression neutral. "I've reviewed your previous submissions. Unfortunately, they didn't meet our strategic standards. Your projections are overly optimistic, and your branding lacks cohesion. There's potential, but it's buried under too much fluff." Tessa shifted uncomfortably. "We can make improvements. We just didn't have the right guidance before. But with you, Clara. I mean, with Nova Edge, things could really turn around." I could hear the panic creeping into her voice. Brittany tried to smile. We're absolutely open to feedback. We'd be honored to have you mentor us through the process. There it was again, that tone. The same syrupy sweetness they used back in school when they wanted something. I tilted my head slightly. Mentor you? She nodded eagerly. Yes, you've clearly built something amazing. Maybe you could share a bit of your expertise, just like old times. The irony was almost painful. The old times she spoke of were the same years they'd made sure my confidence never survived. I smiled faintly. Old times are best left behind, don't you think? For a moment, none of them spoke. The silence stretched, awkward and heavy. Finally, Brittany cleared her throat. Look, we might have been a little insensitive back in the day, but we've all grown up. And now we're just here as businesswomen trying to make something great. Her voice cracked halfway through the word businesswomen. I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I tapped the edge of the contract folder with my pen, letting the moment hang. Then I slid it across the table toward them. This is your proposal, I said calmly. I've made some notes. Take a look. Lauren opened it first. Her face fell. Page after page was covered in red ink comments, constructive but brutally honest. Every weak point, every unrealistic claim, every piece of fluff had been highlighted and dismantled. This level of feedback, she murmured, voice trembling. It's thorough. I nodded. That's how I work. Brittany glanced at me, her eyes filled with something new, fear. Does that mean you'll still consider us? I looked at her for a long moment. I'll consider it, I said finally. But understand this. Nova Edge doesn't work with partners who don't respect integrity. If you want this deal, it'll take more than money or charm. You'll have to earn it. The words hung in the air like a verdict. Tessa tried to laugh, but it came out shaky. Of course. We're professionals, Clara. Whatever it takes. Good, I said, closing the file. Because I'm not interested in reliving high school dynamics in a boardroom. For a heartbeat, the three of them sat frozen. Then Brittany forced a nod. We understand. Completely. I stood, smoothing my jacket. Then I think we're done for today. Janelle will be in touch about next steps. I walked to the door, my cane tapping softly. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I could feel their stunned silence behind me, the quiet realization settling over them that the woman they once mocked was now holding their professional fate in her hands. Outside the room, Janelle raised an eyebrow as I stepped past her. That went well? I smiled. Better than expected. Back in my office, I sat down, exhaled slowly, and looked out at the skyline. For the first time, I didn't feel like I was looking back at my past. I was looking down on it from a place they could never reach. And before they could recover, I slid the unsigned contract across the table. For years, I'd signed checks for strangers, but this signature would rewrite my past. When the conference room door closed behind them, I sat there for a moment, letting the silence settle. The folder they'd left behind sat at the edge of the table, their desperate energy still clinging to the air. I'd faced those women countless times in my mind, imagined standing tall, calm, untouchable. But nothing could have prepared me for the real thing. Seeing their eyes widen when they realized I was the CEO, that was a moment 10 years in the making. Not because I wanted to humiliate them, but because it finally balanced the scales. They'd spent years trying to make me feel small, and now they had to look up to me. Later that afternoon, I reviewed their proposal again, this time without the emotional fog. Their numbers didn't add up. Their projections were inflated, their marketing shallow, their storytelling weak. But underneath all that chaos, there was something, an idea with potential. If they weren't who they were, if this had come from anyone else, I might have approved it already. But this wasn't business anymore. This was personal. Janelle stepped into my office quietly, holding 2 coffee cups. She set one on my desk. So, how did it go? I smirked. They walked in like they owned the place. They left realizing they didn't. She grinned. And the proposal? Garbage, I said bluntly, flipping a page. But fixable. You're actually thinking of working with them? I looked out the window. The city glowed in the late afternoon sun, glass towers glinting like reminders of how far I'd come. I'm thinking of giving them enough rope to see what they'll do with it, Janelle chuckled. That's terrifyingly vague. Exactly, I said. She left, shaking her head. I turned back to the contract lying open on my desk. There was a signature line at the bottom. CEO. Approval. Clara Hayes. Just seeing my name printed there stirred something inside me. Power. Not the greedy kind, but the kind born from finally being in control of your own narrative. Signing my name had never felt so heavy. Over the next few days, I let them wait. Brittany sent a polite follow-up, pretending not to be anxious. Then another one, less polite. Finally, on the third day, she called Janelle directly. "Can you please tell Miss Hayes we're willing to make adjustments?" she pleaded. "We'll do whatever it takes." Janelle glanced at me, phone pressed to her shoulder. I mouthed, "Tell her I'll think about it." "Miss Hayes will review and get back to you," Janelle said smoothly. I hung back, watching the pieces fall into place exactly how I wanted them to. That night, I met an investor friend for dinner. He mentioned Lumina Threads without knowing my connection to them. "They're drowning," he said between bites of steak. "Great branding, terrible management. Whoever's behind Nova Edge made the right call rejecting them." I hid my smile behind my glass of wine. When I got home that night, I opened their file one last time. I thought about everything I'd endured to get here, the pain, the isolation, the slow climb back up. And I realized something important. My revenge didn't need to come from destroying them. It could come from making them see. The next morning, I drafted a new version of the contract. I adjusted terms, cut unnecessary sections, and added one critical clause. All parties agree to attend a full strategic reevaluation meeting led personally by the CEO. Partnership will proceed only upon CEO signature following ethical compliance review. It was simple. It sounded professional. But it meant that before I lifted my pen, they would have to face me again, and this time, I wouldn't hide behind politeness. When the email went out, it took less than 10 minutes for Brittany to reply. "We're thrilled, Clara. Whatever you need, we're ready. Thank you for believing in us." Believing in them. The irony nearly made me laugh. The meeting took place 3 days later. This time, they arrived early. No longer cocky, just anxious. Their voices were softer, their smiles practiced but uncertain. I started by going over the data. They nodded obediently, agreeing with every correction, every piece of feedback I offered. It was almost comical watching Brittany, once the self-proclaimed leader, scribble notes like a nervous intern. Halfway through, Tessa tried to charm her way back into control. "Clara, we just want to say how inspiring you are. The way you've built this company, it's incredible." I looked her dead in the eye. "Inspiration doesn't happen by accident, Tessa. It comes from rebuilding what others tried to break." Her smile faltered. Lauren cleared her throat softly. "We're just grateful for the opportunity." I nodded. "Good. Then you'll have no problem with the final clause." They looked at me expectantly. I turned the last page around and tapped it with my pen. "It's a standard ethical compliance review," I said smoothly. "Before final approval, all partner brands must demonstrate full transparency in their corporate conduct, including how they treat collaborators, both past and present." The room went dead silent. Brittany blinked. I'm sorry. What does that mean?" "It means," I said, meeting her eyes, "you'll need to address certain issues before I sign. Publicly." Tessa's jaw tightened. "Like, what kind of issues?" I let the silence do the talking. I wanted them to think about it, to remember. "You're asking us to what? Apologize?" Lauren finally whispered. I smiled faintly. "I'm not asking for anything. The company is. Integrity is one of our founding principles. If you can't demonstrate that, we can't move forward." Brittany opened her mouth to argue, then stopped. I could see it in her eyes, the war between pride and survival. "Fine," she said quietly. "If that's what it takes." I nodded once, signing the top portion of the form but leaving the final line blank. My signature hovered millimeters from the page. "This is as far as I'll go," I said. "The rest is up to you." And as I stood, sliding the contract back toward her, I saw the shift, the realization that I held all the cards, and all she had left was compliance. Then Brittany made a desperate offer, one that made me question how far I wanted my revenge to go. Brittany leaned forward, her voice trembling. "Clara, we'll do anything. Just sign." The air in the conference room felt heavy, like the walls themselves were holding their breath. Brittany's manicured hands clutched the edge of the table, her knuckles pale against the polished wood. The woman who once commanded every room she entered now sat in front of me, small, uncertain, afraid. Tessa and Lauren exchanged desperate glances, silently urging Brittany to fix this. For once, She had no script, no mask, no power to hide behind. I let the silence stretch. I'd learned that silence, when used properly, could make even the strongest people unravel. Brittany swallowed hard. Clara, listen, she began softly. I know we weren't the nicest people in high school. I know we made mistakes. But this business Lumina Threads, it means everything to us. If it fails, dozens of people lose their jobs. It's not just about us anymore. I leaned back in my chair, studying her face. She was right about one thing: their downfall wouldn't only affect them. Their employees, their designers, their interns, they'd all suffer too. But I wasn't sure if Brittany was appealing to my empathy or just manipulating me again. Tessa broke the silence next. Look, we'll add you to the board, give you a seat. A percentage of the company if that's what you want. 10%. 20. Even. Lauren's eyes widened. But she didn't object. They were that desperate. I couldn't help but laugh quietly. You think this is about money? Brittany's lips parted. Then what is it about? Closure, I said simply. For a moment no one moved. My cane rested beside me, the carved handle glinting in the fluorescent light. That piece of wood had carried me through every moment of pain. Every shaky step, every reminder of what they'd taken from me. And now it stood like a witness to this moment. Closure? Tessa repeated, confused. Yes, I said. You see, all these years, you lived your lives like nothing happened. You built businesses, made friends, got rich. Meanwhile, I was rebuilding myself from nothing physically, emotionally, professionally. I don't want your money. I don't need it. I want something that money can't buy. Brittany's shoulders slumped. What do you want, Clara? I took a slow breath. A public apology. A real one. Not an email, not a press statement. I want you to look into a camera and tell the truth. Tell people what you did, and why it was wrong. Not because it helps your brand, but because it's the right thing to do. Their faces dropped in unison. You're joking, Lauren said quietly. I shook my head. I've never been more serious. Tessa scoffed. Clara, come on. It would destroy us. We'd lose everything. I met her gaze evenly. Welcome to my world 10 years ago. Brittany looked torn, her confident mask cracking again. You're asking us to humiliate ourselves. In public. I'm asking you to be honest, I said. It's not the same thing. The silence stretched again, long and suffocating. The only sound was the faint ticking of the clock on the wall. Lauren whispered something to Brittany, too low for me to hear. Tessa's hands trembled in her lap. Finally, Brittany straightened her posture, her chin trembling as she met my eyes. If we do this, if we apologize publicly, you'll sign? I nodded once. Yes, I'll sign. And I'll personally oversee your campaign. You'll get your merger, your investors, your future. But you'll also set the record straight. Tessa stood suddenly, her chair scraping the floor. This is insane, Brittany. She's trying to ruin us. Sit down, Brittany hissed. Tessa blinked in disbelief. You're actually considering it? Yes, Brittany snapped. I am. Lauren looked between them. Brittany, think about what this will do to the brand. To us. Brittany turned back to me, eyes glistening with something between anger and surrender. If I agree to this, will it really end here, Clara? No more games? No more games, I said quietly. Just truth. For a long moment, we just stared at each other, the girl who once led the pack, and the girl who once limped behind it. Somewhere between us, the years dissolved, and what was left wasn't hate anymore. It was exhaustion. Brittany finally nodded. Fine, we'll do it. Lauren looked horrified. You can't be serious. I am, Brittany said firmly. If this is what it takes to move forward, then so be it. Tessa muttered something under her breath, but she didn't leave. I slid the contract across the table once more, my signature pen lying beside it. Then you have my terms. Once the apology airs, the deal moves forward. Brittany hesitated, then reached out her hand. We have a deal. Her handshake was trembling, but real. As they gathered their papers, I sat there quietly, feeling the strange heaviness of victory settle in my chest. I should have felt triumphant. I'd won. I had their careers, their futures, and their pride in the palm of my hand. But instead of joy, I felt uncertain. Because for the first time, I wondered if this was justice or if I'd simply become the mirror of the cruelty they once showed me. When they left, Janelle peeked her head in, So? I stared at the door for a long moment. They'll do it, she smiled faintly. Then it's done. I shook my head slowly. No, not yet. They hesitated. But greed won, and they agreed. When they walked on stage at their own launch event, no one knew what they were about to confess. It was a crisp Friday evening when Lumina Threads held their much-anticipated product launch. The ballroom shimmered with glass chandeliers, soft lighting, and rows of journalists ready to record what was supposed to be a triumphant night for the Golden Trio. I watched from the back of the room, my cane resting against my chair, the Nova Edge logo glowing faintly on the large screen behind the stage. Everything looked perfect on the surface. Cameras flashed, champagne glasses clinked, and the buzz of success filled the air. But under that glittering facade, I knew the real story was about to unfold, the one they had promised me, the one they had tried for days to talk themselves out of but ultimately couldn't escape. They had agreed to deliver a full, public apology as part of their partnership deal. I'd drafted the framework myself, word for word, ensuring it sounded genuine without sounding rehearsed. Still, I could tell from Brittany's restless glances that her confidence was cracking. The MC called her name, and she stepped forward, microphone in hand, wearing a white silk dress that made her look fragile instead of powerful. Tessa and Lauren flanked her, both tense, both trying to hold their composure. "Good evening, everyone," Brittany began, her voice quivering slightly. "Before we share our exciting new collection, there's something personal we want to talk about." Murmurs rippled through the audience. This wasn't on the program. I crossed my arms, waiting. Brittany took a deep breath, eyes flicking briefly toward me at the back of the room. "When we started Lumina Threads, we said our brand stood for authenticity, empathy, and growth. But the truth is, we haven't always lived up to those values, not in our business, and not in our lives." Tessa shifted uncomfortably beside her. Lauren stared straight ahead, her face pale under the stage lights. "In high school," Brittany continued, voice steadying, "there was someone we hurt deeply, someone who didn't deserve it. We mocked her, belittled her, and made her feel small, because we were insecure and cruel." The crowd fell silent. Even the photographers stopped clicking. "And that person," she said, her voice cracking, "is here tonight." Heads turned. I could feel dozens of eyes suddenly searching the room until a spotlight caught me sitting in the back row. For a moment, my heart stopped. I hadn't expected that. Brittany's gaze found mine. "Her name is Clara Hayes. She's the CEO of Nova Edge Solutions, the company that gave us a second chance when we didn't deserve one." A wave of whispers swept through the audience. I sat motionless, the attention heavy but strangely freeing. "We owe her more than business," Brittany said softly. "We owe her the truth. Clara, we're sorry for every word, every laugh, every time we made you feel less. You didn't deserve it then, and you definitely don't now." Her voice broke at the end. The microphone picked up the tremor. Tessa blinked rapidly, her mascara threatening to run. "You were stronger than we ever were," she said, her tone quieter, stripped of its usual bravado. "And seeing what you've built, it's made me realize how wrong we were to ever judge you." Lauren hesitated, then finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "I used to tell myself it was just teenage drama, but it wasn't. It was bullying. And I'm sorry." The apology hung in the air like something sacred, fragile, and uncomfortable all at once. I didn't move. I didn't smile. I didn't cry. I just watched. For the first time, they weren't performing. They were unraveling. The audience could feel it too, the tension, the sincerity, the disbelief. When Brittany finally ended with, "We hope our story reminds everyone that growth begins with accountability," the room erupted in cautious applause. It wasn't thunderous or celebratory. It was uncertain, like the crowd was unsure whether to cheer or reflect. But it was enough. As the applause died down, the MC awkwardly transitioned back to the product launch. But the energy had shifted completely. The press conference that was supposed to celebrate fashion had turned into a confession. I stayed seated until the lights dimmed and people began whispering among themselves. Reporters were already typing furiously, no doubt crafting headlines about the shocking apology from Lumina Threads. When I finally stood, my legs trembled not from weakness, but from release. My cane tapped softly against the floor as I made my way toward the exit. Halfway to the door, I heard a voice behind me. "Clara." I turned. Brittany was hurrying down from the stage, heels clicking against the floor, eyes red but determined. She stopped in front of me, breathless. "Thank you," she said. "I know it doesn't fix everything, but thank you for giving us the chance to try." For a moment, I didn't answer. I just looked at her. The woman who once led the pack of laughter behind me in the hallways of our school, and I saw her differently now. She wasn't the enemy anymore. She was human, flawed, learning. "You did the right thing," I said finally. "That's what matters." She nodded, tears threatening to spill again. "I meant every word up there." "I know," I said softly. "That's why it worked." I turned and left before she could say more. Outside, the evening air was cool and still. The city lights reflected off the river nearby, shimmering like 100 tiny mirrors. For the first time in years, I felt light. Not vindicated, not powerful, just free. I thought I was done with my past. I thought this was the end of the story. But life has a way of adding epilogues you never see coming. But karma wasn't done with them yet, and I didn't have to lift another finger. Within 24 hours, their empire began to crumble. The morning after the launch, my inbox exploded. News alerts, social media mentions, interview requests. Lumina Threads' apology had gone viral. At first, I thought it might help them. Public vulnerability sometimes worked that way. People loved redemption stories. But by noon, it became clear that wasn't what was happening. The internet had turned. I sat in my office, coffee untouched, scrolling through post after post. Every platform was flooded with outrage, disbelief, and ridicule. The apology that had been meant to show growth had been dissected, mocked, and twisted into something else entirely. Someone had dug up old videos from our high school days, grainy footage from a camcorder showing Brittany and Tessa laughing in a hallway, pushing past someone with a limp. Me. The caption underneath the clip read, "These women built a brand on empowerment. This is who they used to be." The video spread like wildfire. Comment sections filled with anger. Sponsors began releasing statements distancing themselves from Lumina Threads. Influencers who had once tagged them in glowing posts suddenly deleted their collaborations. Even journalists who had attended the launch now published think pieces questioning the sincerity of their apology. When accountability looks like publicity, can a brand built on cruelty ever recover? The headlines piled up like debris after a storm. By evening, I received a message from Janelle. "Have you seen this? Brittany's investors are pulling out. Half their deals are collapsing." I opened the attached document, a leaked internal memo from Lumina Threads board. It confirmed what I already suspected. The apology had triggered panic. Revenue projections dropped overnight. Their PR team quit. Even their online store temporarily shut down due to an influx of refund requests. For a long time, I just sat there, the glow of my computer screen reflecting off my glass office wall. I should have felt satisfied. This was the justice everyone dreams about, the universe balancing its scales. But watching it unfold didn't feel like victory. It felt like watching a slow-motion collapse that had been set in motion years ago. By midweek, the trio was in full crisis mode. Tessa's social media presence disappeared overnight. Her influencer accounts were deactivated. Her partnerships severed. Lauren's real estate firm, built partly on her luxury influencer persona, released a statement removing her from her own brand, pending review. And Brittany, the once invincible Brittany Cole, became the center of it all. The press hounded her mercilessly. Photos of her crying outside her office building made the rounds on gossip sites. She'd lost the board vote that same morning. The company she'd built, the company that defined her, gone. I was reviewing another client proposal when Janelle knocked softly on my door. "They're asking for you." I looked up. "Who?" "Brittany," she said quietly. "She's been calling. She says she needs to talk to you personally." I hesitated. A part of me didn't want to pick up. Another part of me, the part that remembered lying in that hospital bed, unsure if I'd ever walk again, wanted to hear the tremor in her voice. I nodded. "Put her through." The line clicked. For a few seconds, there was only silence. Then a shaky breath. "Clara?" "Yes," I said softly. It's all gone," she whispered. "The company, the investors, everything. They're saying I destroyed the brand, that we should have never gone public with the apology." I listened quietly, my pen rolling between my fingers. "I thought I was doing the right thing," she said. "You told us to tell the truth." I did. And now it's all over. I closed my eyes, exhaling slowly. You told the truth because it was the right thing to do, not because it would save you. Actions have consequences, Brittany. You can't control how the world responds. Her breath hitched. I just wanted a chance to make it right. You did, I said gently. But making things right doesn't always mean keeping what you had. There was silence again. A long, painful kind of silence that filled the space between us. Finally, she whispered, "Can we meet?" Something in her tone, fragile, defeated, made me agree. Tomorrow morning, my office. After she hung up, I sat there staring out at the skyline, the city glowing beneath the fading light. For so long, I had imagined what it would feel like to have her on the other side of that power dynamic, to see her beg, to see her stripped of arrogance. And now that the moment had come, I didn't feel triumph. I felt empathy. Because I knew what it was like to lose everything. I knew what it was like to have your identity ripped away and replaced with shame. The difference was, I rebuilt mine. And she was only just beginning that journey. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind replayed the events like a film reel, the laughter, the accident, the years of silence, the reunion, the apology, and now this. Maybe the universe really was fair after all, but it didn't mean justice came without pain. The next morning, as I prepared for Brittany's arrival, I looked down at my cane resting beside my chair. I had once hated it for what it represented, but now, it felt like a symbol not of weakness, but of endurance. No one gets through life without limping a little, and maybe, just maybe, it was time to show her what healing actually looked like. And then, one of them came knocking at my office door. It was Brittany, her makeup gone, pride shattered, eyes filled with regret. The next morning was quiet, unusually so. The city outside my office window moved at its normal pace, but something about the day felt heavier, slower. I'd arrived early, wanting a moment to breathe before she came. I'd brewed my own coffee instead of letting Janelle bring it, something grounding about that small act of control. At exactly 10 o'clock, there was a soft knock on the door. "Come in," I said, already knowing who it was. Brittany stepped inside hesitantly. Gone was the woman who once commanded every room she entered. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun, her once flawless makeup replaced with tired, puffy eyes. The crisp business suit she wore hung loosely, as if she'd lost weight she couldn't afford to lose. "Hi," she whispered. I gestured to the chair across from my desk. "Have a seat." She did, her shoulders slumping as though the chair itself was holding her up. For a long time, neither of us spoke. The silence was thick but not hostile, just heavy with everything that had never been said. Finally, she looked up at me. "I don't even know where to start." "Start anywhere," I said softly. She took a deep, shaky breath. "I ruined everything. My company's gone. My name is a joke online. Like, I don't even know who I am anymore." Her voice cracked on the last word. I studied her face, the same one that used to sneer at me in the school hallway. Now unguarded, almost childlike. "Who were you when you built Lumina Threads?" I asked, her brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" "You said your brand stood for empathy, empowerment, change," I said. "Did you believe that when you started it, or did you build it to look good?" She hesitated. At first I thought I believed it, but maybe I just liked the way it sounded. I nodded slowly. "That's honesty. You might not realize it, but that's the first real step." Tears welled up in her eyes. "Clara, I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't even think I deserve that. But I wanted to say this face to face. I'm sorry, for everything. For what we did to you back then, for how we treated you at the reunion, for the way we mocked you when you were struggling." Her voice trembled, and she wiped her cheeks quickly. "You didn't deserve any of it. You were always better than us, and we couldn't handle it. I see that now." I didn't speak immediately. Her words hit harder than I expected. After all these years, I'd imagined this apology 1,000 different ways, but never like this. Never this raw. When I finally did speak, my voice came out quiet. "You're right about one thing: you can't undo what happened. But you can choose who you become now." She nodded, staring at her trembling hands. "I don't even know where to start rebuilding." I leaned forward slightly. "Then start with something small. Not with a company, not with an image. Start with the truth, every day, even when it's hard." She looked up, her tear-streaked face searching mine for judgment, for anger, maybe for forgiveness. I let out a slow breath. "Brittany, I forgave you a long time ago." Her eyes widened. You Did? I nodded. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean what you did was okay. It just means I stopped letting it own me. A sob escaped her, small but real. I don't deserve that. Maybe not, I said softly. But that's how grace works, it's never deserved. She covered her face with her hands, crying quietly. It wasn't the dramatic, performative crying I'd seen before. This was different. This was someone finally cracking open after years of pretending. I walked around my desk and stood beside her, resting a hand on her shoulder. You're not the same girl you were in high school, I said. And neither am I. When she finally looked up again, her expression was a mix of relief and heartbreak. You really forgive me? I do, I said simply. But you still have to forgive yourself. That's the hard part. She nodded slowly, exhaling shakily. I don't know if I can. You will, I said. Eventually. For the first time, she smiled, a small, fragile thing that almost didn't reach her eyes. But it was there. As she stood to leave, she turned to face me again. Clara, thank you. For everything. For letting me say it. I nodded. Thank you for saying it. She gave a small, grateful smile and walked to the door. But before she left, she paused. I don't know what's next for me, she said softly. But whatever it is, I want to do it right this time. I think you will, I said. When she was gone, I sat back at my desk, staring at the city outside. The clouds had cleared, sunlight spilling through the tall windows. It felt like the first clear day after a long storm. For years, I'd carried anger like armor, thinking it kept me strong. But forgiveness, it didn't make me weaker, it made me free. As I reached for my coffee, I noticed her business card on my desk, left behind by accident. I turned it over absently, expecting to see the old Lumina Threads logo, but instead, written in pen across the blank side were two words, starting over. I smiled. It wasn't just her who was starting over. In a way, I was too. But what came next was something I never expected, an offer that changed my future forever. Months later, a new proposal landed on my desk from none other than Brittany. It had been nearly 6 months since that day in my office. Life had fallen into a comfortable rhythm again, client meetings, new contracts, the quiet hum of success that didn't need to be flaunted. I'd almost forgotten what it felt like to carry the weight of resentment. Forgiveness had lightened me in ways I didn't realize possible. But that morning, as I scrolled through my emails, a familiar name caught my eye. Brittany Cole. The subject line read, "A different kind of proposal." Curiosity tugged at me. I opened it. Clara, I know I'm probably the last person you expected to hear from again, but I wanted to show you something. I've been working on a new project, one that's not about profits or image, but purpose. I'd like your opinion. If you're open to it, can we meet? Brittany, no attachments, no logo, just sincerity. For a long moment, I stared at the message. A few months ago, I would have deleted it without hesitation. But now, something inside me was curious. I typed a short reply. Let's meet. Same place as last time. 2 days later, she arrived at my office again, but this time, she was different. Her presence was quieter, humbler. She carried no designer bag, wore no flashy jewelry. She held only a slim folder and a sense of calm that hadn't been there before. Thank you for seeing me, she said, offering a small, genuine smile. Of course, I replied. So, what are you working on? She opened the folder carefully and slid a document across my desk. It's called Rise Again. The name alone made me pause. It's a non-profit, she explained, for women rebuilding their lives after trauma, car accidents, chronic illness, job loss, anything that knocks them down. We want to help them find work in digital industries, teach them new skills, give them scholarships for training programs. I read the proposal in silence, my eyes tracing her words. It wasn't just thoughtful, it was real. There were notes about partnerships with rehabilitation centers, mentorship programs, and scholarships for adaptive workspaces. It was detailed, heartfelt, and surprisingly well-researched. When I looked up, Brittany was watching me nervously. I've been volunteering, she said quietly, at a recovery clinic. I met women who reminded me of you, of what you went through. It changed how I see everything. Her voice cracked slightly. I realized I'd spent years building things that didn't matter. But this feels like the first thing that does. I leaned back in my chair, studying her, And what do you want from me? Her lips curved in a soft, uncertain smile. Partnership, guidance, maybe even co-leadership. I can handle operations and outreach, but you understand the heart of what this means. I was silent for a moment, my mind processing her words. Co-leadership, partnership, with Brittany. If someone had told me a year ago that she'd be standing in my office asking me to help her start a charity, I would have laughed. But the woman sitting in front of me wasn't the same one from the reunion, or from high school. She'd been humbled, reshaped. She was really trying to make amends not just with me, but with the world. I closed the folder and met her eyes. "I'll do it," I said simply. Her mouth fell open slightly. "You will?" I nodded. "If this is truly what you want to help women rebuild, not for image, but for purpose, then yes. I'm in." Tears welled in her eyes. "Clara, I thank you." "Don't thank me yet," I said with a faint smile. "There's a lot of work ahead." Over the next several months, Rise Again took shape. Brittany poured her energy into it with the same intensity she once devoted to profit margins, only now it came from a place of empathy rather than ambition. I helped her design its framework, mentorship programs, financial literacy courses, partnerships with tech firms willing to train and hire women who'd faced physical or emotional challenges. We launched the website quietly, without press fanfare. No grand stage, no bright lights, just a mission that spoke for itself. The first group of women who joined came from all walks of life, some survivors of accidents like mine, others mothers re-entering the workforce, and a few who'd left abusive relationships and were learning to stand on their own again. Watching them learn, laugh, and slowly regain their confidence filled me with something I hadn't felt in years. Pride that wasn't tied to revenge, but to healing. One afternoon after a workshop, Brittany and I sat in the small office space we'd rented downtown. The walls were bare, except for a whiteboard filled with scribbles of goals and deadlines. "I never thought this would be my life," Brittany said softly. "Neither did I admitted. She smiled. "You know, sometimes I still can't believe you forgave me. Sometimes I still can't believe you apologized," I said, half smiling back. We both laughed, a sound that, for once, wasn't forced. It wasn't friendship the way it used to be. It was something different, something more real. Two women who had broken each other once, now building something that helped others rise. When Rise Again reached its first milestone, 100 women successfully placed in new jobs, we celebrated not with champagne, but with handwritten thank you notes from the women themselves. I kept one of them on my desk. "Because of you, I believe I can start over." That one sentence made every scar, every sleepless night, every ounce of pain worth it. And as we began planning our first public fundraiser, Brittany turned to me with a smile that held both gratitude and resolve. "I think this is just the beginning," she said. I nodded, feeling it too. It is. And yet, at our first fundraiser, I saw someone from my past who still hadn't learned their lesson. As I walked on stage, cane in hand, I realized I no longer needed to prove anything. The ballroom glowed softly under strings of golden lights, filled with the hum of laughter, applause, and the faint clinking of glasses. Our first Rise Again fundraiser had drawn more people than we dared hope for business leaders, former clients, women whose lives had been touched by the program. The air buzzed with warmth and pride, not the shallow kind that came from wealth or power, but the deep kind that came from purpose. Brittany stood beside me near the stage, wearing a simple navy dress, her once perfectly styled hair now pulled back in a loose bun. She looked comfortable in her skin for the first time since I'd met her. She caught my eye and smiled nervously. "You ready?" she asked. I tightened my grip on my cane, not because I needed to, but because it had become part of me, a symbol of where I'd been, not what held me back. "I've been ready for a long time," I said. As the host called my name, the crowd began to applaud. I took a deep breath and walked toward the stage, my steps steady and deliberate. Each soft tap of my cane against the wooden floor echoed louder than the applause in my mind. Every tap was a reminder. I survived. I rebuilt. I rose. When I reached the podium, I looked out at the sea of faces, some familiar, some not. But in the front row, I saw them, Tessa and Lauren. They weren't sitting together this time. Tessa looked smaller somehow, humbled, her once flashy outfits replaced by something understated. Lauren's posture was still stiff, but her eyes softened when they met mine. I hadn't seen them since the apology, and I didn't know if they'd come for support, curiosity, or closure. Maybe all three. I smiled faintly. Thank you for being here, I began. The room quieted. My name is Clara Hayes, I said. And I'm living proof that sometimes, the worst thing that happens to you can also be the thing that saves you. I let the words settle. I spent years believing my worth depended on how the world saw me. When I lost my ability to walk normally, I thought I'd lost everything, my independence, my strength, my future. But what I didn't realize then was that losing everything gave me a blank page. It gave me the chance to write a new story. A hush fell over the crowd. Cameras flashed, but I barely noticed. Pain, I continued, doesn't have to be the end of your story. Sometimes, it's just the beginning. Every woman who's joined Rise Again knows what it's like to be underestimated, to be told she's broken, unqualified, or too damaged to start over. But here's what I've learned. Scars don't make you weak. They make you undeniable. Applause broke out, brief but heartfelt. I smiled, feeling a lump rise in my throat. When we built Rise Again, I said, glancing toward Brittany, we wanted to give women a place where they could be seen not for what they've lost, but for what they're becoming. Because rebuilding isn't just about standing again, it's about standing taller than you did before. Brittany wiped a tear discreetly. I paused, scanning the crowd again. That's when I saw her, an older woman sitting near the back, arms crossed, eyes sharp and coldly familiar. It took me a moment to place her. Then it hit me. Mrs. Carmichael, my old high school teacher. The one who'd looked the other way when Brittany and her friends mocked me, who once told me, "You need to toughen up, Clara. The world won't slow down for you." For a moment, her presence pulled me back in time to the humiliation, the shame, the silence. But only for a moment, because then I remembered where I was, who I was. I met her gaze steadily, smiled, and continued my speech. Every person in this room has been told at some point that they weren't enough, and maybe you believed it. I know I did. But I'm standing here to tell you it's never too late to start over, to prove them wrong, or better yet, to stop needing to. The crowd rose in a wave of applause, louder this time, genuine and full of energy. I took a step back from the microphone, letting the sound wash over me. It wasn't the applause that mattered, it was what it represented. Acceptance, growth, closure. As I left the stage, Brittany met me at the stairs, tears in her eyes. "You were incredible," she whispered. I smiled. We were. The rest of the evening blurred into laughter, handshakes, and moments that felt like healing stitched into celebration. The fundraiser exceeded every goal we'd set. Dozens of women came up to thank us, sharing stories of resilience that mirrored my own. Later, as the crowd thinned, I found myself standing alone on the balcony outside the ballroom. The night air was cool, the city lights flickering below like scattered dreams finding their way home. I looked down at my cane, tracing the smooth handle with my fingers. I used to see it as a symbol of weakness. Now, I saw it for what it truly was, a testament, a quiet companion through every step of my journey. Behind me, Brittany's laughter echoed faintly as she spoke to guests inside. For the first time, it didn't sound shallow, it sounded free. I took a deep breath, letting the wind brush against my face. Everything that had once broken me had, in the end, rebuilt me into someone I was proud to be. I wasn't the girl who limped into her past anymore. I was the woman who walked every step deliberate, every breath earned. And as I turned to rejoin the crowd, the reflection in the glass caught my eye. My posture was straight, my chin was high, my eyes were clear. And that night, I walked away knowing I'd finally won not through revenge, but through grace.